Welcome to the Oshow. I'm Laura Babcock. After a crazy long weekend of a minister lawyering up and then quitting, a cabinet shuffle, and crazy characters like Mr. X and Phoenix Kiss and Anaconda. I mean, guys, let me start with you, Keith. Where are you with this giant exploding scandal now? I mean, it's almost a comedy of errors if it wasn't so serious.
It really, it's quite funny at times. I mean, but to watch Premier Ford today, basically just try everything under the sun to talk about, except these particular parcels of land that we moved from the Greenbelt. Interest rates are killing people. That Bank of Canada guy, all this kind of stuff. There's 800,000 newcomers, not 500,000. He's just like losing it. I had a couple of conservative pals send me notes during that particular news conference. One said flailing is never a good look. And the other said, I've never seen anyone try and obfuscate as much at a news conference. And of course, he was just bringing up every other issue under the sun, except it took quite some time for us to figure out that he wasn't actually doing anything with these 14 particular parcels of land other than what he was going to do with every parcel. They get like hundreds of applications. Mark will know more to remove Greenbelt parcels all the time. He's going to review them all now. But he's not putting these particular parcels back in, which is the only way he's going to get any way of hope of quelling this controversy at this point would be, here's our starting point, we're putting them back in. That wasn't his starting point. His starting point was to dance on about how good his cabinet is, and the changes are just going to be fantastic, as Mr. Calandra is pretty much Mr. Housing, as we all know. But this came after, as you say, the Labor Day resignation of the housing minister and the cabinet shuffle. I think that came in large part because of all those Labor Day weekend stories. When people have time to actually kick back and start getting engaged over Labor Day, and we see these things about this Mr. X, who is the unregistered lobbyist, and so you can't be named in the report from the Integrity Commissioner because you're unregistered. That makes no sense. But anyway, turns out he's a former mayor of Clarington, and his company is it boasts MZOs or us. Those are ministerial zoning orders, which are issued by the Minister of Housing to override local municipalities, all their official plans. This is exactly the heavy-handed. The Liberal government used this so sparingly, and with the Ford government, it's just basically a daily occurrence. This stuff, and this fellow was quoted in a podcast last summer as saying, there's not only going to be some broad-scale changes to make development easier, it's going to make the municipalities less intrusive. This was his take before all this was announced. The inside word was clearly out. Premier Ford was asked, there's an awful lot of pictures of Mr. X with you, with Mr. Clark, with all sorts of ministers and PC MPPs, and of course his usual defense is, well, I take pictures with everybody who doesn't, and there's some of these people go out like him and they collect pictures. This company, this Municipal Solutions, I think, is Mr. X's company. His partner, Phoenix Kiss, which is not some southern sexual kink, is some guy who's put a picture of himself up there looking like a cross between Dr. Evil and some other James Bond, on Blofeld or something, and a mob boss with a big cigar. It's just insane. And these pictures were just coming all weekend. So I think this in the Premier's office, they said, oh my God, this is not getting any better. Standing by Mr. Clark, and let's just throw him into the bus. We'll do that there now, and then we'll figure out what to do. They already know what to do. Put these lands back. So Here we are today. He's just done a real tough news conference again. My favorite one of the reporters said, okay, thank you. Back to the point.
Yeah.
Whatever you answered, it had nothing to do with what I asked.
Nobody wants to shuffle a cabinet on the long weekend. Nobody wants to stand at a press conference and have to bring out 65 brag points because they can't answer the question. Like, what the hell? And Ford's biggest brag point today, I don't have a lawyer. If you're at a point in a scandal where you're having to reassure the press corps that you don't need a lawyer, I think you're in some trouble. Mark, what was your take?
Watching today, I am actually more horrified than I was yesterday. And I'll tell you why. Because what happened today was Doug Ford has now announced that he's opening up the entire Greenbelt to development, to 700 applications that were just 6 years ago dealt with through the 10-year review process. Now, instead of waiting for the next 10-year process, which would be in 2027, he's opening everything. And I'm actually more mortified than I was with just the 14 lands, because the other thing that I thought was he made it sound like these 14 lands are going to be thoroughly reviewed. And then later on the press conference, he said, if shovels aren't in the ground and infrastructure isn't paid for and everything else. That is not the way you review lands in the Greenbelt. It isn't. He's basing the review on the rapid developability and the amount of money that developers are willing to throw into these developments to get them started. That should be and it's clear that I hate to say this, but I feel like that Doug really hates the Greenbelt. He really, really hates it. And he mentioned a point about how when Dalton McGuinty government created the Greenbelt, they announced it in 2004, and that they just did it. They just did it. That there was a huge consultation period. Anybody with Google can go back and look and see how there was a over a year process to determine those lands. And secondly, he kept saying how, you know, the Liberal government stole these lands from private owners. Okay, well, let's go back a little bit in history. In 1973, Premier Bill Davis created the Niagara Escarpment. Did he steal all those lands from all those people? In 2001, the PC government created the Oak Ridges Moraine. Did Mike Harris steal all those lands from private owners and put them into the Greenbelt? Like, this is really floundering at a pace I've never seen before. And the fact that he was trying to distract to the government's investments and everything else, and then all of this blaming the former government. I mean,
blaming the Bank of Canada.
Blaming the Bank of Canada. Yeah, I mean, I honestly, like, there's nothing, as Keith said, there's only one job he needs to do: put those 14 lands back into the Greenbelt, and then wait till 2027, or even now. Okay, let's do a full, not a provincial facilitator. Not that, because that, now they're creating someone else to blame. Well, the provincial facilitator thought these lands were worth development. I mean, the Greenbelt was created for a reason, and there are already enough lands to build all the homes that Doug wants to. And tell me you're going to put modular homes on Greenbelt land. Come on, man.
There was so much bullshit flowing in that press conference that it was getting hard to keep watching. But of course, we all had to, because as soon as we get tired is when they start to take things and enrich their friends, and we see full corruption and cronyism. So none of us can stop watching this mess as it keeps getting bigger and bigger and dirtier and dirtier. The idea that they're doing this review through this facilitator, which he kept emphasizing is, independent. But the criteria for the review is a subjective term called merit. What the fuck is merit? Merit is what Doug decides it is on a given day. It's whether or not they like the youth center that a developer is throwing on these lands. This merit concept is nothing but a distraction tool to say, hey, don't worry, you can look away now. We're going to make sure that all this development has merit. Merit means nothing. It is completely one of those words that is used in PR to trick people. And that's what this press conference was to me. I have to ask the question, is he compromised in some kind of a way that his only way out of this hell is to keep going through it and to make it even worse for himself, because now he cannot give those lands back for some reason that we're not aware of. And so he's just going to keep, making it bigger and bigger and bigger, because why the hell not? He's already in it so deep. I mean, is that going on here? And why does the housing minister need a lawyer if this is just a matter of faulty process, which he's already taken accountability for? This stinks. And I think we need the RCMP involved, but I want to know what you think, Keith, to those questions. Is he just doubling down because he can't get out at this point? Is there something criminal going on that there's lawyering up and talks about lawyers from his cabinet?
Well, as you say, he pointed out, he said, I don't have a lawyer. And if my cabinet ministers do, I can't discuss them and their personal finances and what they're doing. So if we've got government MPPs lawyering up, it does make you wonder why and what they're afraid of. I mean, really, do you need to cover up, or can you not, just as the Premier said he did, just answer the questions when they're put to you? Something is definitely up. I thought it was very interesting. There was a post on the weekend that cracked me up. It said the Liberal leadership candidates all vowed to hire a different lawyer next time. Yeah. Not because for some reason Clark hired the one that they used in the gas plant scandal. Just seems absurd on its surface. I think what we've got here is a government that or a Premier that just refuses to admit he was wrong or that he's being questioned. How dare you question? I've got a merit-based system here, as you point out. The criteria for these 14 lands were changed so many times to make them fit as to be, beyond gerrymandering, is to be ridiculous. They didn't fit in the first place. They wouldn't meet any merit criteria now, at least given a real definition of the word. So what he's trying to do here is dance his way around this and just talk about everything else but this, but just to say, it's still that homes is our biggest defense. And if I did anything, slightly, the process was, I wasn't happy with it. I wasn't happy with that process. It should have been better. My God, this is the best you can say about a corrupt, flawed process with 2 reports that just damn your government to no end. It should have been better. So why would we have any faith in this new review process that, as Mark pointed out, could open up 700 applications for parcels of land to be taken out of the Greenbelt? It's just bizarre in the extreme. And I think, again, as I say, this whole weekend of bad news that hit them. And another tweet that hit me on the weekend was Andrew Coyne of the Globe and Mail saying, I think maybe we made a mistake electing a drug dealer as premier.
Right.
Wow.
When I saw Coyne, I was like, okay. And I've seen other people who I would have thought to be, if not Ford sycophants, certainly conservatives or conservative commentators moving. It's like the Overton window was moving this weekend, and people are looking at this going, wait a second, lawyering up, cabinet minister quitting, cabinet shuffle on the holiday weekend when, Ford's supposed to be up at his cottage or throwing a Ford Fest or whatever he does. I mean, it looked worse and worse as the days went by. And this Mr. X character, you heard Ford say, when advocates, do something wrong, they have to be held to account. Well, I don't think any of us would call that kind of gig an advocacy role, with paid incentives and everything else that we heard about over the weekend. But here's where I'm at, guys, with this, is that anyone who's ever watched a scandal anywhere can only see this thing getting larger. And no matter how much Ford doubles down or threatens more Greenbelt lands to show that he can, or he's just stubborn, or maybe he's compromised in some way, it doesn't mean that the scandal goes away just because he's thrown in this false new process and he's doubling down.
I can't help but think that there are some legal threats to the government in not only in the 14 properties if they were taken back out, right, but also people who didn't get their properties taken out in the 700 applications from the previous process, who could then go to court and say, well, here was the government's process for taking these 14 lands out. My lands meet all of that criteria. Why wasn't my land taken out? So I think maybe, and again, this is pure speculation, but I feel like, there's a lot of litigiousness in these Greenbelt lands, people who have speculated, who have invested for the day that, that one day when, we're able to convince the government or whatever, we get our lands taken out. So I feel like maybe this is a bit of a way to fix all of that in one fell swoop. And, there could be a huge cost to the Ontario taxpayer if, the dominoes fall and these lands are put back in. You can't tell me that these landowners aren't going to sue the government for, they were buying land up until the last minute before they were put out, paying huge sums of money for this land. They're not going to want to see that just go for naught. And then I think, so again, I'm really concerned that we may be on the precipice of seeing the end of the Greenbelt, and this could be the doubling down and just and again trying to make it all about the housing, and trying to tap into a group that maybe doesn't understand the value of the Greenbelt, who are new to the country, are new to the province, weren't around when it was created, don't actually understand the important points that the protection points and how it protects us all from flooding and all the things and having green space. And I think tapping into that. So I'm a little concerned that we may be they may have themselves in a real pickle here, and maybe that's why there's no choice for the premier right now other than to double down and just go all in. And maybe Clark just couldn't be part of that, or I feel like when we saw him last week, he was definitely, I sensed some sorrow, I just sensed a man who, maybe just got thrown under the bus here. And so those are my biggest concerns going forward. And I'm very nervous. And if they can delay this out, if they can make it a year or 6 months, then it all stalls and maybe the media lose the narrative. But what's going to happen is that then you're going to be at a point where if other lands are starting to be taken out under the merit system, right? Then you now have lands being taken out in various communities where PC MPPs live. And then you're going to have, I think you're going to have a big blowback from the public. So, they had a chance to just kind of close the loop on this and move on. And instead they're just going to let us all peel back the layers of the onion until and it's going to burn their eyes.
That's a great analogy. This scandal is only going to grow because there are so many layers to the onion.
Oh, this is absolutely going to keep growing. I mean, there's just, as you say, too many unanswered questions. Reporters are going to keep digging and digging. I mean, it took them less than 24 hours to find out who Mr. X was, and that did not look good at all for the government in this situation. So it's going to continue. I think we're going to see the premier, every time he comes out, every PC, MPP, and cabinet minister is going to get these same questions every time. It's not going to wash. And now the question is going to be, are you opening up the entire Greenbelt? Mark was bang on. Premier Ford has referred to the Greenbelt as a speck on a map. He has zero commitment to this as a political reality or as an environmental reality, something that we all cherish. He does not cherish it. He sees it as opportunity, something that can be dug into for developers and reward those rich friends and donors to the PC party. It's a terrible optics of it all, but that's all we're left to assume, isn't it? That he's rewarding his friends, that the process was at the least flawed and unfair and at worst corrupt, and yet we're not hearing anything to address this corruption issue at all. Replacing one minister with another does not address these charges of corruption. And people hear this every day now. The opposition leaders are just going to hammer this point, whether the House is sitting or is not. And it's going to it sinks in. The more you repeat these stories and these messages that this government is corrupt and that this process is flawed, and oh gosh, they're going to double down by opening up even more. This will not go over well, and we'll keep this at the premier's feet. It's lane. I mean, all roads lead right to the premier's office in this file already. He's in the thick of it and says he doesn't have a lawyer. I guess that's the next thing we can watch for. See when he gets a lawyer.
Indeed. And it is a national story now, at least by the media requests that I've been fielding, even today, because people can see that wrong looks wrong, and billions of dollars to buddies and secret deals and envelopes, whether you care about the environment or not, whether you live in Ontario or not, when something stinks. And it sounds as though this government, right now anyway, their play is going to be to go even harder on what they've already done and get as much as they can, because if they can get away with anything in their minds, why not take everything? But as we're seeing, the hue and cry from the public is only getting louder, and it has forced this premier to do multiple press conferences that he probably didn't have scheduled or want to do, to try to put out new announcements, to try to flood the zone, to try to work the long weekend to make it look like everything's hunky-dory in Ford cabinet land. Obviously, the pressure is getting to him. Today, he didn't even look convinced with his own new BS. So it's going to be up to the people, of course, and the journalists to keep digging. And the RCMP. We don't know if there's been criminal activity, but I don't think this scandal goes away until we find out. Thank you both so much once again for watching another Ford press conference. It's not easy. And for coming on the Oshow, and for you watching at home. Keep subscribing, keep giving us your feedback. We're loving it. There's a lot to keep unpacking, or onion to keep peeling, no matter how much it burns our eyes on this thing. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. With a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the Oshow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the Oshow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call on the Oshow. It's a podcast, the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. Stay informed with the Oshow.